Where's all my soul sisters? Let me hear your flow, sisters.
Hey, sister, go, sister, soul, sister, flow, sister.
Hey, you guys, welcome back to another episode of Black on Soul Sister Podcast. You can check us out on Instagram, Facebook at Black on Soul Sister Podcast, and on YouTube at Black on Soul Sister Podcast. Thank you guys so much for joining us again. I have my wonderful, lovely sister on the line with me tonight, Sade White, the artist, the entrepreneur. And when I say she can sing, she can sing. And
Oh,
I just really am very honored to just have her on today to just speak about the realness of and the real nitty-gritty of just the gap in the Black homes and what we can do to basically help fill that gap. And before I start rambling on, because y'all know how I do, Sade, introduce yourself, tell us where you're from, what you do, and
okay. Well, hey, thank you for that introduction. Um, yeah, my name is Sade White. Possibly Sade Yasmin as a music artist, but I'm a server. As my regular job, my daytime job. But I'm a musician, singer, songwriter, face painter for kids' parties, and makeup artist and body painter for adults, as well as portraiture. um, as well. So pretty much, yeah, I just do a lot of art, um, which I guess is pretty common art for us to start transmuting to other spaces. Yeah, art is my first language, and I like to express myself through art. And I think I pretty much think of life as a movie and as an art experience. Yeah, I'm just trying to use my art to create a different reality in a space, in a Western space. So yeah, that's me.
That's beautiful. So, when you say in a Western space, I like how you say that. That was authentic. Elaborate on
Mhm.
that.
I just feel like as I get older, I mean, we've most of us have seen The Matrix, and I don't think you like when you're younger, you kind of just are in it, like you're in the movie and you don't recognize that it is a movie and that it's a script. There's a lot of scripts and there's a lot of placements and stuff. And so, yeah, as I get older, I feel like I start to understand more what what's authentic, like what life would authentically be like versus what's orchestrated kind of against, not always against, but very much against me and the people who look like me. And I mean, there's multiple realities. Different people have the right to create and create life and experiences around life. And the Western lens is a one way to experience life, but now knowing that the Western lens is forced on me and that there are just so many other ways creatively to think in this life, I'd rather explore the freedom of creating life how I organically would if I hadn't been forced into European or colonialistic ideology or
Hmm.
ideals. So that's what I mean.
Yeah, and that's real. Wow, that was a deep level of that. So, yeah, I couldn't agree more, my sister. Thank you so much, Sade. Thank you. And today this is actually the part two of kind of filling in the gap. Last episode I had when we discussed about this was with Shamir Monet, and we actually talked about the gaps in the home. And she's actually a social worker, and she's basically pro welfare. And I want to show you guys some of the let you guys listen to a couple seconds of the clip that her and I were speaking on. But I'll do that later, a later time, because I really want to just hear how you feel and what your intake is on when it comes to welfare in the predominantly ethnic communities.
Mm, okay.
like, how do you feel about welfare? What are your thoughts?
Oh, okay. Sorry. So, in terms of government in general, I think if it was an organic concept, if this wasn't a country that kind of had an obsession with Black oppression and other minority oppression, that it'd probably be a great idea because I think one of the things that makes the United States stand out in terms of the outside perspective in a kind of naive scape,
Mhm.
in terms of the outside looking in, is the idea that the government can help you when you're on your last leg or when you need help. I think that's a progressive thought for a country, and I
Mhm.
think that can make us stand out in a positive way. But since it's not obviously a picture perfect world, and this culture does have a history of nuances of Black oppression, kind of in every way of existing, then I would say, I mean, obviously, there's a lot of plans to make sure that something that should be good isn't. And so I had looked at the video that you had sent me, and it is unfortunate um, the qualifications it took for our particular welfare um, for it to be successful in the homes of Black people. And I do think that the results of those restrictions do manifest in daily life. I mean, I think there's a lot of factors for the reason why we see the Black community the way that we do today. And welfare is one of the factors that contribute to it. Um, but yeah, if it was organic, if it was pure intentioned, and it supported and worked with mathematically and scientifically with the family unit in helping support that and also eradicate poverty, then I would agree with welfare. But as it is today, and how pretty much every system in the United States meant to help, quote unquote, help Black families or whatever it's meant to be in the space, generally harm Black people, then
Right.
as it stands today, I don't think it's been great. But I do believe in helping the family units when they're low. But I do think that it was an opportunity to kind of make a community more vulnerable under the
Yes,
guise of
yes.
help being helpful.
Yes, yes. And honestly, I agree to all of that. I am more lenient to the vulnerability of a community, because I do believe during that time. Okay, let me not go too quick. So I want to show you guys this clip of the welfare and what she's talking about and mentioning about the video. I want to show you guys this clip about the actual welfare policies that were put in place for people, honestly, like my mom and whoever else that even tried to fight back just a little bit had to be put in.
For Hype Plus News, I'm Nichelle Woods. Black people in America have long worked to lessen the gap between whites when it comes to building wealth. Slavery, redlining, and even the family dynamic within the home have all played a role in making the task more difficult to complete. Government assistance was created in the 1930s to solve a temporary issue. However, society showed that these benefits could be necessary long term. As time has gone on, government assistance became a mainstay in many Black households to help make ends meet. With many of the Black homes receiving government assistance being headed by single Black women, questions come into play about just how beneficial this would be for Black people. There's no denying that Black people live in poverty at higher rates than whites, and that government assistance does help with food, rent, and other necessities each month. On the other side of the spectrum lies the issue of broken homes and the poverty that comes from receiving government assistance, ironically enough. Considering both sides, the million-dollar question becomes, did government assistance ruin the Black family? Like many things, government assistance was given sparingly, if at all, to Black families in the early 1900s. In 1935, following the Great Depression, President Franklin D. Roosevelt established the Social Security Act of 1935 with intentions of assisting the elderly, dependent children, and those who had lost their jobs as a result of the Depression. Despite the fact that Black families were clearly more impoverished overall, the assistance given out overwhelmingly went to white families. Information taken from the Child Support Hustle revealed that, with the New Deal deal, state legislators began to pass bills that supported single mothers called Mother's Pension. Since the states operated these programs, administrators were not regulated by federal government. The lack of governing of the Mother's Pension program meant that states could deny services and money to qualifying Black mothers. This aspect of the law caused great issues as it would set the precedent for caseworkers in states to set forth even more provisions in order to keep Black families from receiving government assistance or giving up something of equal value in order to receive such help. While the practice was illegal with no penalty for continuing it, the tactic became more common, allowing caseworkers to essentially control people's lives. Rules regarding a suitable home were enacted without giving Black people a clear idea of what that would entail. In the South specifically, Blacks saw great pushback when it came to receiving government assistance, with states posing stipulations that discouraged a complete Black family. Alabama is one state that stands out, as the state independently submitted a plan in 1964 about a substitute parent rule that would effectively harm Black families specifically. Aspects of the proposal stated that a child would have a substitute father, hereby disqualifying their home from receiving government assistance if a substitute father lives in the home with the child's mother for the purpose of cohabitation, if he frequently visits to cohabitate with the mother, or if he does not frequent the home but cohabitates with the child's natural or adoptive mother elsewhere. These facts are telling as they show a direct attack on the Black man by giving an ultimatum of them being in the home, even for a short period of time versus receiving help. With the Black marriage rate lowering from the 1960s on, cohabitating was common throughout the country. While again, there could seem to be benefits in this way, statistics have proven that the creation of these single-parent homes through the type of legislation has a lasting impact. These new laws, beginning in 1964 from Alabama and other states, paralleled the passing of the Great Society laws passed in the same year that saw government assistance change, possibly for the worse. The Institute of Family Studies sheds light on this fact, stating, "It was estimated that in 1975, a household head would have to earn $20,000 a year to have more resources than what could be obtained from Great Society programs. In today's dollars, that's over $90,000 per year in earnings. That may be a reason why in 1964, only 7% of American children were born out of wedlock compared to 40% today. One can see through this tactic that the government purposefully incentivized these women to have more children out of wedlock, as the type of money being offered, even in more modern times, is hard to come by as a salary for anyone, much less a Black man or a woman. In the early to mid-1990s, Black households saw a peak when it came to fatherless homes, as nearly 70% of Black families saw this as their reality. This number had remained relatively unmoved for decades before dropping back down, and there are still government programs and benefits that people know they could be in danger of losing due to other people. There have even been several Black women refusing to get married in fear of losing their benefits, as they will receive more money personally from the government than they could from a job by not having the man present. On the other side of the spectrum, however, statistically, these homes still end up with children living in poverty, as marriage, according to the IFS studies over time, will position these families to have more money and be able to survive long-term, as the two incomes, even with the women's lowering, over time would position these families to maintain. These women choosing not to marry was not a simple choice, but more so a government tactic forcing them to choose between money and family. Another major change that may or may not have played a role in damaging the Black family was the transparency needed from government assistance recipients as time went on. Welfare and other assistance would be given to those that showed need, giving the government access to bank account information and essentially one's entire life to determine eligibility. For the Black family, this would lead to a surge in improper spending and the trading of benefits for another. Selling of one's food stamps became popular in the 1980s and beyond, whether it be for cash or another benefit. With some families already receiving cash assistance on top of other benefits, the existence of these programs led some to try and find new ways to qualify in order to receive more money. While it is much more difficult today to have one government assistance program provide more money than one can make in a year, it is still very possible to combine programs to be able to provide everything a person would need. Possibly the biggest factor to consider when it comes to government assistance is how it spiked the rate of child support cases in the Black family. Once many of these women had gotten the man out of the house to receive their benefits, they realized quickly that this money, depending on how many children are present, would not be enough to sustain a home. Lawyers in the 1990s would even work pro bono on a case dealing with child support, giving these women more confidence in taking the father of their children to court and receiving more money. Courts notoriously gave men payments to make that were outlandish, with penalties that would make it impossible for them to get the money needed. This action, unsurprisingly, would lead to an uptick in crimes committed by many Black men of the time. In a published paper by Harvard alum Fritz Foley, one can see the correlation between crime and welfare payments as the text reads. Analysis of daily reported incidents of major crimes in 12 U.S. cities reveals an increase in crime over the course of monthly welfare payment cycles. The jump reflects increases in crime that are likely to have a direct financial motivation, like burglary, larceny, theft, motor vehicle theft, and robbery. Taking into account the countless issues that come from having a record when it comes to making money, on top of systemic racism, especially in years past, one can see clearly how this assistance ruined the lives of many Black fathers and children at the very least, as their fathers would spend years in jail, and with the overwhelmingness of being a single parent, the children suffer as well in ways unimaginable. There can be debate about the reasoning behind certain decisions Black families made. However, the need for more assistance is clear. Families selling stamps for cash, fathers being kicked out of the homes, and caseworkers who acted as an extension of the government while breaking the law all played a role on how government assistance would affect Black people. The need for assistance is obvious, especially in the present as a recession looms over society. Nevertheless, it is clear that there are major issues with government assistance that have plagued Black families for decades. If assistance is given to elevate a person in order to help them become more independent, one should ask themselves if this seems like the case when it comes to Black people. With a history of struggle and suffering despite this help, it may not be a foregone conclusion that assistance ruined the Black family, but many can argue it did little to help, as Black families today see nearly half of their homes without a father and are still financially trying to catch up in society.
Okay, I'm going to stop it right there. Okay, because she just said a lot. And my question to you is, what country are you? What country? Where are you from, Sade?
Oh, I'm from here. I'm from Boston, particularly.
Okay, you're from Boston. Okay, so so I don't know how it was in Boston growing up, but I do know I personally came from I wouldn't say the projects, but I came from, like, you would say, the hood, family, government assistance, income, you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm one of the few that made it out, you know what I'm saying? Like, thank God, knock on wood, that I don't depend on that today. So I remember, like, hearing conversations growing up of women saying, you know what I'm saying, you know, how they do want the baby father around or whatever, but they can't have them around because their money would get cut off, or because they wouldn't be able, if they did come around, the man isn't able to make enough money to even supplement what the government is giving them, you know? And so I really, really, really came to believe that, you know, just with that type of mindset, it has really led a whole generation of females to feeling like they don't ever want to get married, to feeling like, well, why should I get married if he's not going to be able to take care of me the way that I need to be taken care of? Or why should I get married if I already got all these stimulus checks and, you know, all this money coming from me because I got 5 kids? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I definitely think that's a factor. I think it's also complicated because there's traditional roles in Western society of misogyny and womanhood, and that plays into like today's society too, like women, because like just in general, American society and women kind of like independence in general and don't want to sign their rights away in terms of just, you know, kind of pass concepts of being controlled and trade-off. Well, being
Yeah.
controlled, but then Black men don't necessarily fit into the mold of what the power structure, obviously, that white men have. Um, and so then as
Constructed, yeah.
yeah, constructed. Obviously, obviously it's not organic, but still the perceived reality, is that Black men per capita don't generally make as much money. So then it'd be like, do you sign over the traditional concepts of masculine and feminine roles of marriage or romantic relationship where that person doesn't make more money, and then does that feel oppressive? But besides that, I do think that that probably did happen in terms of welfare, making women feel like they're better off on their own. And I definitely see, even in comments on Instagram and Facebook today, women having said, I pay $3,000 worth of bills. So if I can do that on my own, I don't really see the point of conversing with a man,
Mhm.
because I don't want to
Mhm.
be distracted or waste my time when I could just live solo and take care
Be
of things on my
happy.
own. Yeah.
And some people are just happier single.
Yeah, I can definitely understand that. It's a lot of responsibility to be uh, a couple, though I do think it's necessary for the growth of a community to sacrifice or to learn the sacrifices of compromising and growing with somebody else beside yourself, especially in a family unit.
Yes,
Um,
that's what I would say. That's the especially and the main context, because I would say live your life, be single as much as you can. And but when it comes to children and a community, yeah, it's definitely something where we seem to struggle. We struggle very hard trying to upkeep.
yeah, no, it sucks because I think it's a mixture of incarceration mixed with
Hmm.
um, assistance, and incarceration for me is a really big thing just because I feel like in my community, as of late, being in Atlanta, that I've more run into incarceration culture in the Black community. And
Mm.
I wasn't really aware of it as much, even though it's still because my family in Boston, which they're extended to Jersey and New York, they're affected obviously by the typical politics of Northern Black poverty and wealth. Um, my grandfather, I think, comes from a wealthy family, but my grandmother was an orphan, and she lived an impoverished lifestyle that affected my mom and her siblings. Um, and my dad's side came from Ohio, and they got to live a pretty moderate middle class lifestyle. So all those are different contrasts of Black like existence. Like they never lived on welfare. Like pretty much was away from a lot of. They didn't obviously escape from Black politics because that's always going to follow them, but they just didn't get it as harsh as other spaces, such as living in Boston or New York or New Jersey or Georgia. Um, but I mean, nobody goes unscathed. But yeah, so it's been a contrast in terms of my life and me internalizing uh, how government has affected, the Black family structure and culture, and how it's affected my family, because my
Right.
grandmother was a single mother and she raised her children, and a lot of their mental health issues, I
Yeah.
feel like, came from grappling with poverty and growing up in a society that was anti them, and her trying to. She was a super big artist as well, so I assume that's where I inherited my artistic skill from. But she did struggle a lot, and it did trickle down to her children, and they were able to find their own success. Because
Mhm.
the next generation hopefully can do better.
Right.
Um, but they definitely are all affected psychologically by the. Well, she had died early from cancer, but they were also affected by the poverty and the struggles of growing up
Right.
in poverty in the North. So, and I don't know if she did welfare, to be honest, because it seemed like she was struggling a lot, so maybe she didn't.
Mhm.
Um,
And that's usually the people who are on welfare. They're the ones who's struggling a lot, because some of the stipulations to even keep welfare. Like welfare, as I've heard, like they literally want you to live in a cardboard box and not make enough to, like, you can't make too much and you can't make enough, as opposed to, you know, certain migrants. And see, what kind of gets me with that whole system, because like you said in the beginning, like the system of welfare and the ideal of the government protecting and serving and being there for the people in time of need, that is phenomenal. That's what a country is supposed to be off of, you know. But what really gets me is that, you know, the people who have really, not even the people now, because, you know, I can't say now, it's a lot of lazy Black folks, any race, you know, but this is the Black Sister podcast, so we're talking about the Black folks. There's a lot of lazy mugs out there that don't want to do nothing. But I'd be dang on, we cannot sit here and just degrade our ancestors as if they did not come over here and work hard with their blood, sweat, and tears and help build this country and basically pave and open the doors for other, you know, countries to come into the United States. And, you know, when other migrants come in, they come in and they try to dream the dream, but they don't see that there's a whole nother systematic oppression that is spent just for these type of people. And so when they come here and you get a migrant family, I know I have a lot of African friends, European friends, you know. I know a European family that came here within 5 years. They live in a big mansion in Sandy Springs. Went from apartment, townhome to a big mansion. So what our government is doing to us is really biting our hands, eating our cake, and celebrating with the Boston Tea Party behind our backs. And I see, you know, people coming from other countries, and I see how the countries actually care for the other people. Like Russia's over there giving giving women money to go have children.
But it's almost like the welfare situation, to be honest.
And that's exactly what I was about to say. And then you got us over here that's like, oh, you got 10 kids. Oh, great. Let's go ahead and give you 30 bands at the beginning of the year. Or let's go ahead. It's like almost like, girl, let me try and have a child by the end of this year so I can put them on my taxes.
Yeah.
Seriously. And that's what the government got us into. And so my question is, Sade, what do we do? How can we destigmatize this? Like,
well, I think ultimately there's a lot of healing on both gender spectrums. I mean, I think there's a lot of missing links in terms of, I think the women want to be independent, and we're used to being independent to a certain extent. And I definitely know I come from a lot of independent women myself on my mom's side, where my dad's side is more family unit and more married people. But I would say, well, from an artist standpoint, since I'm an artist, I think ultimately moving a culture or getting a culture to sign on to the same idea isn't that hard, to be honest. I mean, it does take a lot of consistent work, but I think that if different spectrum or different media genres work together to kind of fill in pieces where people ended up kind of getting or having the idea for the same conclusion, a conclusion that ends up being that the family unit is kind of in that organic space where people can get married and they believe in getting married, and that men have jobs or careers or are given the support to have jobs and careers where women don't feel like they're compromising, and that they can trust that they could be in a family unit, and that they would feel like it wasn't just like that they would be married to kind of work 50-50 or work hard, but just have the title of marriage. That would encourage marriage in general. But I think us all signing on to an idea that we're going to create art to move the masses mentally so that they can move physically is the first idea. And that's something that I kind of have a plan for as a musician. I'm trying to get to the space where I can do my art and that it can be kind of internalized on a larger scale. I think that ultimately people who have more influence in the Black community have to kind of make a sacrifice and decide what they're going to focus on and not to kind of go with fickle pleasures and to invest in ideas that have kind of been harming the psyche of Black people collectively. Like that we all have to kind of sign on to the idea that we want the same future. I think that we have to put our money where our mouth is, so everybody who has money, and even creating systems where a lot of people can put their little bit of money, and then we can, instead of relying on American government, we don't have to make an official government. We can just create systems in our businesses where, okay, we want families to be here by this time. Where are the geniuses in the community who know how to think? If we did this and moved this way, and we did this over this amount of years, how would it shift the Black community and how they move in one direction? I think we need to find those people. I think we need to invest in those projects. Then I think we need to be steadfast in executing those projects. So I think a mixture of media, planning, businesses, and technology that helps move things a lot faster than human capabilities in the past. And let me think, what else? I mean, I think those are the major components, to be
Those
honest.
really are, because
Technology.
that's what they control in order to keep us down, in order to portray not even to keep us down, but those are the main hands that are controlling everything. So you definitely did put it down to the nitty-gritty.
Yeah, I mean, I think technology will do all the work for us. Like, I don't think it'll take even like 1/4 of the time that it took to break down our community if we learn how to use technology to the capacity that we could at this point. I know that they say that the Black community is also double affected by, escapism from depression and this reality through social media and phones. Also know that we give a lot of our ideas through the concept of free media and also doing business and being promoted. But we give a lot of our ideas to white companies and they pretty much benefit exponentially. So I think we just have to be ahead of technology and all of the devices and or programs that we use that shape our reality for now and in the future. So yeah, that's that. That's all. Sorry.
And when you, I'm interested when you said when you were talking about your grandfather, you said something about your grandfather before the show.
I was saying my grandfather, he was definitely a Nation of Islam. So there's the piece of that energy and kind of how he held himself and kind of streamlines through his children, my aunts and my mom and stuff in terms of black pride and kind of thinking out of the box of how you want to move in the Black future and not kind of catering to
And this is the
European
wealthy grandfather, right?
the one that came from wealthy background, but he himself was troubled at one point. So I think it translated differently by the time it got to my sibling. I mean my mom and her siblings. In terms of my grandmother was impoverished more, or I feel like she went through impoverishedness, and that probably had more to do with her upbringing, being an orphan and trying to grapple with reality and not having, and Black relationships being complicated back then, because of trying to grapple with the reality of oppression and then also trying to create love in a space, which is not the easiest thing in general, but it's definitely not in a colonialistic like world and being Black. But yeah, my grandfather was definitely part of Nation of Islam, and he was part of, I forgot what university he went to. I wrote it down on a notebook before he died, but and that was like the summer before he died. He started telling us everything, so I was kind of astounded. But he definitely won, like, I don't remember how much, like probably $30,000 to $60,000 for his Black club in a white university, and he was able to invite a lot of. Oh, I think it wasn't Malcolm X. I think it was Mr. Farrakhan.
Oh, Louis
Fannie Lou Hamer.
Farrakhan.
Yeah.
Yes, I love me some Farrakhan now.
Yeah, no, definitely. Fannie Lou Hamer and a lot of other people, but I don't remember the names. I have to look
Yeah,
back at that notebook.
that's
But his parents,
amazing.
yeah, no, it was cool to hear about that time frame. So definitely knowing about the history of your grandparents and their parents can make a major difference.
Oh,
And he
yes.
was telling me
Oh,
about his parents. His father, I think, or my great grandfather was, I know he was a third, not a Thurgood Marshall, but he was definitely a lawyer. I think he was the president of the NAACP Atlantic City chapter. And so he was very pro-black, and I know he wrote articles. He was either murdered or killed himself. Question mark, nobody ever knows. But he was
right.
definitely fighting for the rights of black people. And I know it was really passionate for him. I think he wrote an article about wanting dignity or wanting to live by dignity or what it would be like to be treated like a human and be
Mm,
given his dignity. So I know he was a sad person or just had a hard time grappling with reality. And then his wife, my great grandmother, I think she was a certified genius and she was on the team for creating the nuclear bomb or something of that
wow.
nature. So now that he told me all that, I just I feel like really you do inherit kind of the passions of your great great
Yes.
grandparents and your
So
grandparents, like because I never knew why I was so passionate about Black people from a young age, but now I recognize it's just genetic, like I'm just inheriting kind of a legacy, and I'm really happy to get those missing blanks because I am very passionate about Black people, and I feel it very strongly in my bones. So I really hope that in my lifetime, with all the things that I'm like blessed with in terms of talent, etc., that I can be a part of the story of us getting to a whole nother level inside of ourselves. So
right,
yeah.
right. That is so beautiful. And I want to get into when you talked about the love, like no more love, because that's just so deep. It hit me deep. Like that was it. They took the love out of the home. The
There's a lot of
love,
frustration in our community.
yeah, it's a
It's a lot of
lot of
blame game right now in the present currently. And I even had that like a bitterness towards Black men and a
mm,
blaming um that I'm still working through, trying to take therapy, trying to really grow within myself so that I don't ever need a scapegoat, including especially in my like opposite. But I recognize that Black men also have that same energy. And so
yeah,
then I was recognizing that we can't both keep that
we
energy and then
can.
expect things to grow.
We
Um,
can.
and it's not even our fault, the reason why we're in this predicament. So there's no point of taking it personal and trying to do the blame game between us two, because we're all just victims of circumstance when in being in a colonial, we're in the belly of the beast as it comes to colonialism. I mean,
Amen.
at the end of the day. And
Amen.
so it's a rough space to kind of inhabit or exist. It's a lot of plans for us. And a lot of people don't know, and that's kind of the beauty of ignorance.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but one thing I recognize with the older male generation that I've lived with, and a lot of them are very pro-Black. A lot of them have accomplished a
Yes.
lot of things. A lot of them have seen a lot of things in different Black communities. It's a lot. It's hard for them to grapple with their power being taken away.
Oh, yes.
Um, and they do take it out on us, just like we take out different frustrations on them. I mean, you're just going to take it out on people who are in the closest proximity. But the love is definitely with the frustration of our humanity being tried and trying to find out what our own individual humanity means, what it means to be Black, what we trying to figure out what we deserve, what's true in all the false propaganda and what's false. Um, we just end up having a lot of negative feelings that we just give to each other, and we all want love really bad because I mean that's just kind of like God is love, and we are obviously extensions of God. So we try to find that root energy, but it's just a lot of pain in the process, and there's been a lot of pain in existing as a Black person in this world in general, as a
Yeah.
person in general, and so especially as a Black person in a well-established colonialistic world that's taken hundreds of years to get to. Um,
Yeah, I was
Can you
talking
tell me
to
what
a
we can do?
Kenyan friend of mine, and she was like, "You guys can have all of your African American men. I don't want them." And she said, I, and which is true because I've dated quite a few African men and African American men, and I see the difference. I
Easier
see the big
for
difference.
foreigners to be loving because they kind of come from a space that's not their
Yeah,
community.
and of course, if they come to the States, they've been well maintained in their country in order to even,
Yeah.
sometimes get over here. So it's like you see the dynamics, but so I wouldn't say it is black all because I had a big stigma, just like you. I had a big stigma against black men. Like I only dated white guys at one point in time. And it was just like I wanted to date white guys because the black boys were picking on me all growing up. And then if I was with a white guy, my daughter wouldn't be as dark as I am. And she would have
I definitely
better
used to have
hair than me.
Yeah, I definitely used to have a colorism thing when I was younger, but I lived in
Yeah.
Mississippi, so it was
Oh,
kind of hard.
oh goodness. Woo.
It's like the wind whispered nigger. I don't know if that was
Woo.
appropriate,
She
but
said the wind whispered. Goodness.
it'd be hard to grapple with living in
Right,
certain
that part.
society.
And so um I had a problem with that, until it took me to start loving myself and start finding out who I was, and trying to actually get back to my roots. And that's what a lot of black women fail to do because of what you say, the media, everything that's thrown into our faces. We seem to be the most vulnerable culture to it. Like
Hmm.
we feed into it so much. And the biggest ones who feed into it and get nothing in return. Nothing
I
in
think
return.
it's hard though because we're like the main
We
guinea pigs for
are.
like the white obsession
So it's like,
in
how
terms of
can you pay
America.
them if we're looking at them to get paid? You
Hmm.
know? Like, I'm not going to
Yeah.
pay you for that. This is how I'm going to get paid. I have to learn this. Like, and so with that being said, with taking the love out of the home, I believe that, and not even a believe, it's proven to show that when there's no love in the home, the woman has to what? Become the strong, quote unquote, black woman.
Yeah.
So when we become the strong, quote unquote, black woman, we no longer need the man. And that's all happy and dandy for the government. Their first part of their project, Module A, is complete. But now you don't have the man. And so that woman grows what? Too independent and too bitter. I don't care what you say. The more independent you seem to flaunt that you are, the bigger your bitterness grows inside. Because for one, come on, man. I just don't feel like me personally, I don't feel like whatever you believe in, the gods, the God, the spirit, God Himself Almighty, did not put us down here to just be alone. I feel like we're supposed to be, incohesive with someone else, with another partner. If you choose to be alone, let it be. But with them choosing to be alone, especially having a whole bunch of kids, it grows into bitterness and the love is gone. And so, guess what? With that little project being played with the Black communities, you have other communities who are coming in from European countries who are not oppressed by the system, who are still holding family values that they've came and brought in from their countries. So, as the family values are being broken down systematically, then you have the other cultural family values who are being uplifted, i.e.,
Mm.
more marriages, i.e., happier relationships. They look happier. They seem more happier. That's the whole Mr. and Mrs. Jones picture.
Yeah.
And now the Black woman is mad because she too independent, while the daddy is hopefully, God forbid, 6 feet under or somewhere in the jail being enslaved. So that creates the bigger gap. That creates a bigger wealth gap. That creates a bigger income gap. And then we realize we want to know why now, like, it's so, woo, yay. You finally own your own home. Yeah, that's a great accomplishment in the Black community. But it seems like that's like our height of our accomplishments.
Mm.
And that's just so basic in other communities.
Yeah.
So I say that just to say that is that, of course, they took the love out of the home. And when they took the love out of the home, that helped the project to increase the wealth gap of the Black communities versus other communities. And with that being said, I'm going to roll this last clip for you.
Buying and owning a house in this country is not easy. It is harder still if you are a Black family. The gap between white and Black families has always been wide, and now it is at an all-time high. Axel Tercios is live for us in New York City tonight. And Axel, how big is the gap that Black homeowners face?
Del, the gap right now in 2023 is about 30 percentage points, and it's even higher than it was in the 1960s. And when we asked the experts about the barriers potential Black homeowners face today, they told us that the list is very long, but some of those that they mentioned are mortgage rates, which is determined by credit scores, and also the lack of generational wealth, which at some point could help someone buying a home.
The American dream supposedly includes owning a home, though for many, that is far from reality.
It's more difficult for Black individuals to access homeownership than white individuals.
Historically, Black families face more barriers when taking the very big step of buying a home. Setbacks generally not the same as white families.
It's important that we don't talk about these things as unfortunate, like a car accident, but we really lean into the fact that they are unjust, that inequality doesn't just happen, it is manufactured through choices.
The Urban Institute says the disparity between white and Black homeownership is about 30 percentage points right now in 2023. It was about 27 percentage points in the 1960s, and that number should have gone down after the Fair Housing Act was passed in 1968. The act was supposed to ban racial discrimination in housing sales and rentals, but it continues to be a significant issue.
You don't have the right level of implementation, enforcement, and evaluation, you don't actually get to a different type of outcome. And this is what we see in terms of public policy around race in particular.
Rashad Robinson, president of Color of Change, a racial justice organization, says there are multiple reasons behind the gap. For instance, Black students are disproportionately burdened by student loan debt more than white students. This affects debt-to-income ratio and the potential to save for a down payment. The National Association of Realtors finds Black households are more than twice as likely than white households to have student loan debt. Credit score is another factor banks use to determine who is eligible for a mortgage. According to Robinson, the process is deeply discriminatory as it relies on choices and opportunities and does not account for the resources that people were born into.
There's not enough accountability and evaluation of the credit industry, and they're able to operate in ways and block people, exclude people from opportunities as private entities, as entities that are not accountable and responsible for the decisions that they make. All of us end up being responsible and accountable for them.
According to John Choi, senior research associate for the Urban Institute, housing disparities don't just present themselves in the current market, but can be traced back generations.
You need more down payment assistance to buy your first home. So a lot of young adults who have a home-owning parents and who have a huge housing wealth, they have a greater opportunity to buy their home at an earlier age in life and accumulate wealth.
Homeownership is one of the most important sources of building generational wealth. If you buy a home early in age, you're more likely to have higher wealth when you retire.
What we found from a study is that when we look at like 20 years ahead and what will happen to the black-white homeownership gap, we saw that the trend would be also unfortunately persistent over time. So we'll still probably see around like 30 percentage point gap between black and white homeownership unless some kind of policy is implemented to close that gap.
We can't just be in a just conversation about stopping the harm, but also fixing the harm that was done.
In order to close racial homeownership gap, Robinson says it must include more public policy and clear plans, as well as accountability and real consequences for those exploiting the system.
And that will require investments. It will require us really looking at how do we fix these problems and provide opportunities for communities at scale to deal with the unforgivable past we have of exploitation of communities, of this country reneging on its commitments and in its compact, of redlining, of exploitation, of targeting, of banks.
We do collect information in our annual survey, and we ask about experiences in the housing market, such as steering, which still may take place even though it is illegal to discriminate based on race in housing.
Dr. Jessica Louts, Deputy Chief Economist at the National Association of Realtors, says that if the current discriminatory practices continue to go on, future generations will feel the impacts.
For their children, for their grandchildren moving forward, they may not be able to rely on intergenerational transfers of wealth. And that's what we see for successful home owners and buyers, is to be able to transfer down that wealth to future generations. And so that's lost out on.
Del, all the experts, producer Mine Nolasco and I spoke to agreed on one thing. They say that in order to help people buy a home, especially black families and other people of colors, there should be an increase in affordable housing and also more regulations over the credit industry. Del.
Axel Tercios for us live in New York City tonight. Axel, thank you very much.
Like he said, the only way that we could do this is what we were talking about earlier, is basically getting together, investing, making a plan, business through technology, and getting ahead to try and, implement some policies that will help our generations to come, because who else is going to do it? It's our time now. We have to do this stuff.
Yeah,
and I just
I think also the Black community at large, like I think one of the major things that affects any country or any culture is trade. And so I feel like I don't know if it's actually possible considering how much the Western society and Europeans do to make sure that we don't have control over trade. But I feel like if Black people across Caribbean, Africa, Europe, and in Americas decided that we were going to start trading in a way, or giving our best resources to each other in terms of helping encourage resources for business, but especially in the resources that Europeans kind of use against us that generally end up benefiting the most having access to, that it'd be a major switch in finances for not just African Americans, but the African diaspora. But yeah, definitely technology, us following the model that a lot of people who move to this country from other countries do, which is putting your money in one basket and investing in different groups at different times. But we don't have to do it with family. We could do it in a bigger spectrum in terms of creating a social media platform that maybe encourages business the way the way that Instagram
Netflix do it too.
Yeah.
I'm glad you said that.
Instagram.
We're actually on the same wave, and I have to get you some information because I'm actually a part of a chamber of commerce that does exactly what you said, that is a part of the diaspora. And we are basically we're mainly located in the Central Africa within the 6 countries in that region, in the Caribbean islands, and we're stretching here now. And that is exactly what we're doing. And I would love to invite you to our conference coming up in August that we're going to have. And it's basically about trade, agricultural, investment, and mining. And we're going to have a big membership field trip over to Africa the end of next year to the land where we have to do some mining and looking, and so people can actually see the gold come out of the land and the sources and the minerals and the cobalt and the lithium, and just basically get to see the land so that we can cultivate the ways and the structure on how we're going to move forward with international trade. The only concern that we are kind of facing when it comes to coming into the US is that actually being inclusive. Be inclusive to other races. And yeah, I have that same type of response. But
it depends on which Native Americans I empathize with, because they kind of have the similar story to us to a certain extent.
I do too. But then I tried to understand from not just a American traditional way of thinking, of American brainwashed, westernized, cultivated way of thinking. Like, I try to think of it from outside the box. Like, although they call them, what they call them,
First Nation?
Mangzulu, the white Africans, Mangzulu. But there are white Africans. There are light-skinned Africans. There are pale Africans with red hair and blue eyes. And I've been trying to, they've been trying to help me get out of the race card that the America try to put us in. And
I don't mind as long as it's not like those particular Africans don't control Black Africans in terms of the same way.
Right. And as long as there's no plans of infiltrating, like, because that, and that's why I feel like it's very important for us to come together in the diaspora, because it's so much that the Black Americans can teach them about society and the system that they're not keen to or aware of. And so I just think that's so prevalent and so important in closing the gap. And I'm so glad you brought that up, because I do believe that's it. Trade, investments, and coming together. And with the media, you know what I'm saying? And the media is basically the coming together, because it shows the world that we are working together and that it is going to happen, at least pushing us into the direction of it. And so I would love to have you join in, become a member of the USA Africa, because it's definitely bigger than us. It's way bigger than us. Like, it's already hit the legislation in the White House. So
that's dope.
It's a lot that's going on. And so we have our first, the first convention is coming up in Washington, D.C. We're going to D.C. In July. And then the next convention that we're having here in Atlanta is going to be in August. So it's going to be really exciting to see everyone come together and to see the ideas that we start coming up with, because this is the beginning of what you exactly just said. And this is where it starts. And so when you said that, it was funny, because I was going to be like, well, we're talking to them. It's us. We're the ones to do this,
Yeah, most def.
So
Most of. I'm looking forward to it.
I really, really, really do, really, really do appreciate this talk because I've learned a lot from you. And I want to close this out with one question. What advice would you give? What advice would you give the mother, the single mother at home who has given up on love, feel like the government is good and okay with her, but still struggles every day? Like, what do you have to say to that everyday struggling single mother that refuses to have a man or a spouse in the home?
Well, even though I do think also that some of these men do not want to also have the responsibility of being sometimes that provider as well. So I don't think it's also 100% that women don't want men in the home, because I know it's a lot of affectionate women who also there's just scarred people, and a lot of them playing games. Like a lot of people just be playing games in this generation, a lot anyway, and a lot of trauma and a lot of that comes from trauma from the previous generation, so that gets in the way as well. But besides that, I would say that everybody should pray to their higher source, because a purpose is already set. Everything. I mean, honestly, I believe something my mom told me is nothing's really real. The only thing that's real is your reality and the test that you're facing. And so everything around you is just kind of cultivating you and your spirit to become who you're meant to be. And so when you really submit to things, life will lead you where you need to go. Life will grow you in the way that you need to grow. You just have to have an open mind. And so, try to always go towards what's organic, what's loving, what may not be comfortable, but will allow you to expand and become something greater. And that's for Black men and Black women, because both of us are struggling in this fight, and all people are struggling in the fight to become better or to be aligned with their creator. So I would just say pray, keep your ear to the ground, and try your best to hear what's being spoken to you, as you are guided, to your ultimate purpose. So
That's beautiful.
yeah.
Well, there you have it.
Okay.
The most loving, kindest, genuine way of basically telling ourselves we need to get our shit together. Pray. Pray. Learn to love yourself. And once you do that and you start praying to your higher source and start listening. See, a lot of us, we have so many distractions around us that we don't take the time to just sit and bask in our quietness and listen to our thoughts. And some of us are afraid to listen to our thoughts. But once you do that and you start, becoming more clairvoyant and deciphering the good voices from what is, from your counteractive voices, because it's all you. Find yourself, find you inside of that, and love yourself. Whether you single, whether you don't want a man, whether you are a man and you a single father who got a crazy baby mama it don't matter. Like, love yourself. With that being said, we love y'all. Catch us all the time. I do apologize, y'all. I've been out. It's been real hectic, but it won't happen again. I promise. Thank you so much, Sade. I really do appreciate you coming on the show and just talking about this. I've learned a lot from you and about you. And yeah, it's
Thank
been
you
a
so much.
pleasure.
I appreciate it. I don't really get to talk on podcasts or say my opinion, so it was nice to be able to express a few things.
But I definitely want to say thank you, Sade, for coming on the Black on Soul Sister podcast and sharing your experience with us.
Oh yeah, no, most def. I loved it. It was very fun. And I always love talking about the Black experience. So thank you so much for giving me the opportunity.
Welcome. And y'all hear it. We love y'all. Catch y'all next time. We out.
Hey, sister, go, sister, soul, sister, flow.